So welcome everybody to the Watershed Education Center. My name is Mary Underhill and I'm the Canisius Lake Watershed Manager and Planner with Livingston County Planning Department. And I wanted to invite you guys to listen to a landowner's guide for dealing with stormwater, erosion, ice jamming, and sediment. That's probably not the official title, but that's what we're going to be dealing with today. I wanted to start off with a little bit of housekeeping and then introduce the folks. That I have a couple of newcomers. I see some people are regulars, so bear with us as we talk a little bit about the Watershed Education Center. And then I'll introduce the speakers and we'll move right into the program. My understanding is that the speakers will be able to handle questions throughout the presentation. So, and we're also going to be videotaping, so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do a little bit of the intro and the closing, because it will go up online on YouTube. For the Watershed Education Center, for those folks that are new to us, this is obviously Vital Park in the town of Livonia. We serve as an educational hub for providing information primarily about the watershed, but we do delve into a couple of hot topics or interesting topics. But mostly we bring in professionals that have local and regional knowledge. We do have several partners with the town of Livonia, the CLA, the Cornell Cooperative Extension, the Planning Department, and the Department of Health. And we have our sister program on the other side of the parking lot, the Chip Holt Nature Center. They serve our children and our families, and we serve the teens and young adults and the adults. Last year we did 12 programs. We reached 470 people, and I'm sure that we're reaching people continuously with our YouTubes as well. So that's a little bit about the Education Center. Our speakers, we have Megan Webster in the back. She's been wonderful, taking very good care of Livingston County, and she was one of our very first speakers in 2017, I think it was, 17-18. So Megan serves as the District Manager for Ontario County Soil and Water Conservation District. The district works to implement projects across a variety of land uses from ag to stormwater management that protect water quality and soil health. Megan has an MS in environmental chemistry, and she's worked around the world on natural resource protection and restoration projects. Growing up on Cayuga Lake, Megan has a strong appreciation for our Finger Lakes and focuses her work on protecting these resources. Don, Department of Health, he's been a public health sanitarian for our county, Livingston, with the Environmental Health Department for 7 years. In 2019, he took over watershed inspector duties, and he enjoys this part of protecting public health and our natural resources. So I've covered all the foundation, and I'm ready to turn it over to Megan. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Don, he can take the floor.
Thanks, Mary. So like Mary said, I'm the Canisius Lake Watershed Inspector with the Livingston County Department of Health. My role is to enforce the rules and regulations of the watershed to protect the water supply for the towns and villages that get water from Canisius Lake. So I have a regulatory role. So if someone's installing an illegal septic system, or they're building a house and they don't have proper sediment and erosion control, I can enforce on those things. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today is non-regulatory. It's all caused by natural events. So the large rainstorms that we had, especially, was it 2 winters ago that we had the really large rains, caused a lot of the photos that I'm going to show you now. Mary and I received a lot of calls regarding those events and the damage that was done. And we can respond and help guide people, kind of tell them what to do, but we can't do anything about it, really. It's a tough thing to say, but it's the truth. So I'm really looking forward to Megan's presentation. I think she's going to have a lot of good material. I'm going to learn a lot, and I hope you enjoy it as well. So I'm just going to start and show you a few of the photos of the large events that we had. Mary, do you want to talk real quick about road dish?
So, yeah, put a camera here. Can you see me? I'm so short, so I don't want to stand there. You're like, yeah, who is that? Well, actually, you would know who that was. So this is a road ditch erosion, and this actually is connected to a grant that we have put in. It's about almost $1 million, and it's going to service the towns of Canisius and Sparta in the town of Geneseo. And the reason it's up here is more for the fact that we have this kind of erosion along our roadsides, but it's nice to be able to pair it with something that we can do. One of the reasons why we can do something here is because it's affecting public infrastructure. So our WEC grant, which is water quality improvement grants, is connected to stabilization of, in this case, town infrastructure, which is town roads. So in the town of Canisius here, Joy Road, and the town of Sparta, this is Story Road, and in the town of Geneseo, this is Long Point. And you can see we've got road impacts. These are all road ditches. So we're looking forward to getting into that grant 2023 to 2024.
Thank you, Mary. So here's great examples of some stream bank and shoreline erosion. This is a property on is it North McMillan? It's not. Is it North McMillan?
To be honest with you, I'm cheating in the middle of the screen.
I don't remember. I think that's what it is. So this property is just washing away. It's at the mouth of the creek. Anytime there's a large storm, it just washes more. This is a really good example of what tree roots do. It's might not be super easy to see, but it's holding all of this land together. This is right over here at Hannah's Creek. There's a large deposition of sediment that goes along the outlet that's going to need to get removed at some point. This is down on Long Point, to the south of Long Point Creek. When we had those big floods, the water just swirled and washed away all the waterfront. And then that's another example in the upper right of some stream bank erosion. The homeowner's land is just being cut away. Here's some really good aerials of what happens with all that sediment being deposited. So down here, it's being deposited at the end, and so these folks over here are starting to lose what they have of a shoreline, and other people are gaining. Same thing up there. This is a photo of this land didn't used to be there, and now all that sediment is being deposited. Plants are growing up on it, and it's just gonna stay there and cause issues for the folks on the other side. Ice jams and flows were a big deal 2 winters ago also. This is North McMillan Creek in the bottom right and over on the right. It caused those ice jams caused a lot of flooding for folks in that area. And then this is right out here at Bytail Park at the point. Looks a whole lot prettier now with that natural shoreline project.
Yes, yeah, we're going to see how that ends up, how the ice jamming will impact the natural shoreline. We've been assured that it's going to be more stable than what it was out there before. So.
And then here's some photos of flooding out on Long Point Park. And then there's that's a SUNY Brockport student doing a stream flow study on North McMillan Creek, which is up there in the upper right-hand photo as well. So like I said, all these are caused by natural events. Most of them, I guess, some could be caused by humans. I don't have any great answers. I can just pass along resources to folks. And this is where Megan comes in and can tell us about what we can do.
So again, thank you for having me. My name is Megan Webster. Mary already introduced me to you. Just another bit, as I mentioned, I grew up on Cuba Lake and witnessed a lot of the things that you see on Canisius Lake as well, firsthand growing up through my life, and then now is my role as a district manager for soil and water. A lot of the projects we do are dealing with stream banks and shorelines and how we look at making them more stable and robust for our future. So I know that you all are, since you're here, very aware of our changing weather patterns and our increase in weather events. And if I move that, is that going to be
It's fine.
problematic? Okay, great. I'm going to move in front here. It's just easier. So, as you see from the chart here, we are increasingly seeing more water coming at more concentrated events. And so these are more intense storms occurring over a shorter period of time, a lot more water being seen. When I go out to a site visit, the number one thing I hear is, it never used to be like this, okay? And that is, in the cyclical way, somewhat true. We are exiting, about a 10 to 20 year drought. And so we're moving out of that drought cycle into more water. In addition, we're seeing the changes of climate where an increased temperature in our atmosphere allows more water to be held in the atmosphere, right? So more water up in our atmosphere then is able to condense and fall down in much greater volumes in shorter periods of time. And the days of maybe a light, gentle rain for 6 hours over the day doesn't happen anymore, right? It comes in very short bursts, very intense amounts of water over short periods of time. And your neighbor down the road 2 miles away might not see any rain, and you've gotten 2 inches. And so this is something we're seeing across the board throughout our region. And you can see here, just a few examples of when major rainstorms happen, the washouts that occur, whether it's along a roadside or this is a blown out culvert that then took the road with it. And as I mentioned, the increased intensity and volume of that rainfall really has very dramatic impacts on our infrastructure, especially with undersized or poorly maintained infrastructure. So it's something that we have to deal with. Most of our public infrastructure is designed for a 10-year storm, okay? A 10-year storm, just to put it in perspective, is around 2 inches over a 24-hour period of time. When they say a 10-year storm, it's a probability thing, right? It doesn't mean that if you've had your one 10-year storm, you're not gonna have another 10-year storm for another 10 years, unfortunately, because over the past summer, we've had about 4 10-year storms, okay? So it's just a gauge for us to give an idea about the amount of rain that we're dealing with over that period of time. And it's something that we use as a metric. This is recently, obviously you might have seen this in the paper, the storm on July 8th. This is town of Canandaigua that experienced a 1,000-year storm. We had 5.5 inches in 2 hours in the Canandaigua area. And obviously it led to massive flooding. We had over 100 homes damaged in Ontario County, and it was a very localized storm. And in that region, we've had about 17 inches over a month period. So, it was already saturated soil, and then having this amount of rainfall come in behind it, there's no way that our public infrastructure is built to handle this type of thing. So, we all know the consequences of these massive runoff events, or when infrastructure fails, or just general movement of soils through our system. Those soils and sediment and pollutants have a lot of impacts on our local waterways. And it's very, very difficult to clean dirty water. Okay, it's better to control it at the source so those pollutants and nutrients aren't entering our waterways. Once they're there, very difficult to clean. Very expensive to clean. So what we want to do is really focus on the sources of those pollutants and see how we can really control those. You all are very aware of harmful algal blooms, and that is one of the issues that is potentially stemming from increase of nutrients to our system. We do know that it's not just nutrients to systems. We know in very nutrient poor systems, such as Spinny Atlas Lake, they still have blooms in that area, right? So it's a mixture of many different things. Increased carbon in our environment, increased quagga mussels, zebra mussels that are selectively filter feeding, are and the cyanobacteria in the water, they don't like to eat that, so they spit it back out. Obviously the warm weather, still waters, they all lead to algal blooms. So ultimately, we're looking what we can do to control harmful algal blooms. And it's going to be a myriad of situations, right, and controls. It's not just one magic bullet that we can get to control these harmful algal blooms. So a lot of what we do is, across the board projects looking at how we can control this issue. You're, I'm sure, all aware of the postings page for harmful algal blooms. I know there's postings through Livingston County as well. So I'll leave that to Mary to share those resources later. But I'd like to share with you, we are all part of the solution. So it's not just one area of society that is able to control this problem or solve this problem. It's not just agriculture, it's not just construction, it's not just homeowners. We are all part of this situation. We're living in a built environment, and as humans, we manipulate our area around us, right? So how can we do that for the positive and have positive effects that will help us live in the way that we're accustomed to? So a lot of what we talk about is managing, as we talked about, water. Really, it's the energy of water, the volume of water, the velocity of water, the amount of material that can bring with it that we need to control. And that has different, it takes different forms in different places. So in forested natural areas, in agricultural areas, in developed areas, there are best management practices for all of those solutions. So I might use the word BMP, and that stands for best management practice, okay? And it's just the tool in the toolbox. The main thing that we need to do is to build a better sponge. So think about that conceptually, is we want to be able to retain as much water as possible, have that water filter into our soils using the natural processes, using natural hydrology, natural systems. Retention, infiltration, treatment. Those are the main things about how we're going to deal with these volumes of water and how we're going to treat any contaminated water that's in our system. So I'm going to really focus on the streambanks and shorelines because I know that's what you all came today for, but I'll also mention a few other things, and if you're interested, we can follow up later or in the future. But some of the things that we've done as a district is we've put in vernal pools, which are small ephemeral pools that are 18 inches in depth. They're not meant to be a year-round pond, again, as vernal meaning spring. It's just a temporary pool that captures water. Upland water retention, the WASCOG word means water and sediment control basins, right? So a water and sediment control basin is just an area where water is detained for a period of time and then let out slowly. And it provides that treatment and also slowing down that velocity of water. If you drive by a farmer's field and see those orange pipes sticking up in the field, that's a Hickenbottom pipe, and that is an inlet and usually it's associated with a water control structure, right? So they're used across the board through agriculture, through private lands, these water sediment control basins. I'll talk a bit about prefabricated sediment traps, and obviously we're going to go into some restoration projects. So this is just a quick look again, as I mentioned, vernal pools creating, the benefit of putting in vernal pools is water storage and flood mitigation for sure, but it also does have a habitat enrichment component to it. These pools that we've put in with a grant through WQIP funding are teeming with life, whether that be invertebrates and, our local flora and fauna love these small pools. It also allows the groundwater to filter in slowly, and that's really what we're looking at. If you think about a natural way a vernal pool is formed, think about a large tree with a big root base that tips over in the woods. That big scour pool that's left by that tree root base, that's a natural vernal pool. Okay, so just conceptualizing that depth that you're looking at, that around 18 inches of depth. In forest situations, we deal a lot as humans. We need infrastructure such as roadways. And how do we get one place to another? And so we look at rural roads. In our areas here, whether it's you're living in a rural area or you're accessing gravel driveways, that type of thing, road crossings are always a big thing. How do you deal with your road? So this right here, these are 3 examples that we put in at a local DEC land just above Honeyway Lake. If you can see, I'm not sure if we can change the lighting, but if you can see here, there's basically a rubber conveyor belt that's sandwiched between 2 2x4s, okay? And what this is doing is as the water comes down the road here, it's hitting this conveyor belt and then slushing off to the side. So that rubber conveyor belt is placed at a 45-degree angle.
Too dark?
No, that's good.
Yeah, so then you can see it, right?
Yeah, I can see that.
So it's at a 45-degree angle, and it's directing that water off of the road. Again, we're breaking up the water, breaking up that velocity and the amount of water. When we shorten the amount of water we're dealing with, the flow path that we're dealing with, and the volume of water that we're dealing with, we take that energy out. And so we don't give it that chance to be erosive. So this is one example here, and then it's gravel packed in either side. This is something that's very, very inexpensive to do, and it can be put in, you know, right up the hill. Town of Canadice, right across from Joe Bear Road. If you look up the hill, they did their water tower installation. Look up the road and you can see these lining up the whole road. The main thing again is to keep that at a 45-degree angle, and you're shunting the water off into some type of stabilized area. But based on the flow path, you really shouldn't be dealing with too much water there. These are actually cattle slats, so this is used in farming often, but these are cattle slats. Upslope of that area is a stream drainage area coming down through, and it usually crossed this road here and led to a lot of scouring. So we used this, we call riprap, this large limestone rock, and we have this cattle grid here, and the water is able to flow through and over and provide a stable surface for that water to flow over. So the idea is you're either redirecting water or giving it a stable surface, breaking up that flow pattern. Right here, this is something when you are undergoing construction that you can implement. This is what we call a rolling water bar. And so anytime, this is just a bump in the road that's directing the water off to the side. So again, breaking up that flow pattern. You know, in construction areas, if it's not a road system, you'd vegetate that. In a road system, it's just gravelled, but just a way again to break up the water. This is what I mentioned is prefabricated sediment traps. These were something that we used in road ditches in Payne County and Ontario County. This allows sediment to be trapped in this area, and then it's specifically engineered so a ditching bucket on an excavator can come in and ditch that out, or we can use a vacuum cleaner to clean out that sediment. There are small leak holes in here that are allowing the water to slowly sink through and filter out and continue on down that drainage ditch. But it gives you a maintenance point. And the main thing for all of these structures I need you to remember is there's usually a maintenance component, and that is very important. You can't put these structures in and walk away. There's usually some type of maintenance that is needed. So these are some prefabricated sediment traps. And again, that's along County Road 36 in Honeyway. Similarly, these are debris guards. We know that we have a lot of dead ash we're dealing with, right? If you're a homeowner and have ash trees in your yard, they're most likely skeletons at the moment. And all of that dead woody debris is gonna end up somewhere, and oftentimes it's gonna end up in our stream systems. What this is right here, this is a debris guard that's catching that woody debris. And what that's doing is allowing an access point for clean out. And again, it must be maintained and cleaned out. Because if that tree then is blocking this area here, it leads back to that first slide I showed you, which is water coming up over the road or blowing out the entire road. Yeah?
So for something like a debris guard, would that work, let's say some homeowners are adjacent to a culvert like that, or maybe oh my gosh, I forgot the name of it. Not the slough, but when you come into a narrow brick wall, or not, you know what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure.
Oh, where you know what I'm talking about. You know, like this is so crazy. I've forgotten the word for it, but when you're out at the lake and you have a narrow slough with water that goes through.
So what I would say is it shouldn't be. I have not permitted this in. Well, this is a stream, so yes, we've permitted this in streams. So I-beams or this type of thing, you need to make sure, obviously it's a permitting process if you're putting in this long-term structure. And then you also, this area right here was built so that you can access and come down and scoop out and clean it out. So it is very site-specific if you are gonna be able to have access to that point for maintenance, for long-term control.
So that still might be a municipal feature, not necessarily a landowner feature?
I've had them installed in landowner features as well.
Okay.
You know, for especially in steeper sloped areas of wooded steep slopes in rural access roads for driveways and that type of thing, and they put in some I-beams and use that as a catch, and then been able to take out. But again, if you catch wood behind these, that wood will then back up sediment as well and shale. So if you go around Cuca Lake, I believe, not to throw DOT under the bus, but DOT put these in maybe about 20 years ago and hasn't maintained a lot of them. And so you can see the I-beams and they're backed up full. And so it's like 4 feet higher of material that's been then jammed up behind them. And then they're not functional, right? They're not doing the job that they were put in to do originally. So they really need maintenance.
Can you use this for ice jamming? Or can it break up ice in some way? Or is there another feature?
I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that. I haven't looked at it for that.
Okay.
Yeah. I've talked a little bit about stream systems here and the natural channels of streams utilize floodplains, right? So you've all heard the term floodplains and understand that is an area where when the water rises, the water can spread out into their floodplain area, and that dissipates a lot of the energy of the stream, and it gives it an opportunity to then hopefully drop out some energy, drop out some material, and then when floodwaters recede, it comes back to its center channel. So I just wanted to mention floodplains first so we talk about that as we're moving forward. It is very important because floodplains serve a major purpose in stream systems, and they're really critical to have in our stream systems. I'm going to start first with this picture on the right. This is one of my favorite photos, and it's actually not a photo. It's beautiful artwork that was created by the Army Corps of Engineers, Harold Fisk, in 1944, who was a cartographer who mapped out the drainage patterns of the Mississippi River. And it's this beautiful overlay that just shows you how the Mississippi has traveled over time. And you can really see here, streams do not like to be straight. They like to have a sinuosity, a curved pattern to them. And they are always going for that sinuosity based on a whole bunch of factors, elevation and grade and all this kind of stuff. But basically, the energy of a stream as it's coming, as it hits an area, it will then bounce off and then erode here and then come back around, yeah? So it forms point bars, you have a eroding bank and a point bar. This is the natural channel formation of streams. That's how things like Oxbow lakes are formed, right? Have you all heard of that before? This isn't like too new topic for you. So this is one of those things when we're talking about stream bank stabilization, things that we need to think about. Where is the erosion happening? Why is it happening? If we stabilize one area, what's going to happen to the other area? Okay? Whenever we are looking at, the eroding stream bank here, are we redirecting the energy or are we just stabilizing that bank, right? And so those are some things as we're designing these projects, things we need to think about. Because I know you're concerned about erosion, one of the things I want to talk about is the main area of concern in streams is the toe. So anytime this toe right here is eroded, it changes that angle of repose and it causes a lot of undercutting, and then the bank wants to slough. This is the most critical area of any stream, is that toe of the slope. If you want to stabilize a stream bank, unless it's getting massive amounts of water flow from the top, creating issues, your main concern is your energy coming at that toe of the slope in the stream. Yeah, and that's how you stabilize your stream. That's where you need to focus your energy. You might come back in and do work to pull this slope back and vegetate and stabilize, but your main stabilization of the stream happens from the toe. So this is just an example right here, right? So this is an area where it is cutting along that toe and the bank is sloughing off, and all that sloughed off material is entering that stream system and being carried downstream. And it's depositing somewhere. Streams want to create an equilibrium. And then the homeowner here has a lot to deal with, right? It's going to be, it's a crazy situation, but it's trying to get back to the stream stasis here. So, as we talked about with the volume and velocity of water moving through an area, changing, that puts a lot more pressure on our stream banks and causes a lot more erosion. And as we have die-off of tree species like ash and hemlocks through the hemlock-woolly adelgid, our critical riparian areas are becoming deforested. And really, as the picture that was shown earlier, those root systems are really holding things in place. Trees do so much to streams. They help regulate water. They help the water temperature. They help keep the stream bank itself in place. A whole bunch of stuff. So when we have eroded stream banks, it creates a lot of issues. So what can homeowners do? And this is what we wanted to talk about today. Critical thing is maintaining vegetation. Okay, anytime that you are able to keep a vegetated slope and allow both the area which deals with over water flow and also the toe of that slope, any vegetation, that root structure is critical. I didn't include on this slide, but there are fabulous pictures through Cornell Soil Health Initiative that show, you have the plant above the ground and then the root system below the ground. And it's amazing that, 2/3 of that, you have a third up top and 2/3 of root structure down below. And that is performing a critical function of holding things in place. So any vegetation is good vegetation. We work a lot with homeowners who might not have a lot of money to put towards these projects. And one of the things that we often recommend is cut stakes. And what these are live cuttings from trees that will then sprout out and create new trees in the area. And so two things that we often use are streamco willow and red osier dogwood, which are both commonly found in the area. If you want to know more about cut stakes, I just did a recent article in our newsletter in the spring about how to do cut stakes. And so I'll tell you more later about how to access our website to get information there. About how to help basically improve and increase in vegetation in your area for low money. And then keeping a good buffer. So when you mow right up to your edge here, you're not helping out your stream very well. If you can keep a more vegetated buffer, grow some trees, some root structure there, you're helping lock that area into place. There's a lot of techniques for stream stabilization that are used. Some involve rock, some involve natural structures. This right here, what this is doing, these little barbs are helping take the energy around the corner and take the energy and move it out more towards the center of the stream. So the energy of a stream is called the foul wag. That's where the main energy is going through. Originally, that foul wag was coming through here. With these barbs, it's helping pull that energy out and then coming basically here instead, and helping turn that corner. We don't normally use avian baskets so much, it's in here, but avian baskets are something that degrade very rapidly. And so that wire structure then fails and then you're dealing with a whole pile of rocks. So I just put that in there to mention it was used predominantly, definitely in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s kind of time, and we've really moved away from those avian basket structures. So again, what we want to do here is really protect the toe of the slope. And anytime we're doing any project, we're what we call keying it in, going down below the grade of the stream bed here and going down deeper to really embed the structure low so that you don't have water undercutting and coming around your structure. These are some uses of these live stakes, or this is actually wattle, but this is like red osier dogwood that just bundled. And if you're taking it in a time of dormancy in the spring or in the fall, when it comes back out of dormancy in the summer, it'll start to resprout and grow. So that's just a way, again, live stakes or wattles that can be used for stabilization. So this is an example quick of toewood, because I'm going to go into some stream projects that we did. This is using natural channel design. So this is using natural materials rather than just rock to help stabilize the structure. And I'm just giving a quick schematic here. The main components here are a foundation log that's placed along the line of the stream. And then they have large trees with the root structure intact placed out on top of the foundation log. And usually they're crisscrossed back and forth like this so that their root wads are then stuck out in the stream. And that gives some breakup of the velocity of the water. It also provides a lot of habitat. So we use them in trout streams quite often. And then we have some Hoyer wrapped material on top, usually backfilled with soil and planted, and then put some tree structures in there. So that's the basic schematic of what a tow wood structure looks like. This is an example of a project we did up in the town of Victor along a trout stream. So you can see here the eroded stream bank. And then you can see here the trees that were pinned in place with these rocks, but the root structures are then stuck out in the stream, and then it's backfilled on top with soil, and then that structure stays in place, right? So you have a nice grassy area for people to come up and fish off of and grab, you know, hopefully not get their lines too hooked up in the root wads, but it's a great structure. It provides both stream stabilization and also habitat for the trout, which is Fisher's Creek is a trout stream. So this is another project we did in the town of Richmond. This is Mill Creek, and you can see here it was an extremely high eroding bank. Similarly, you can see the root wad structures here. It's basically building a floodplain bench and then pulled back, and then here it is vegetated out. So these are just ways that you can use natural materials to try to stabilize your stream banks. This is, the question I always get is, but will it help, will it hold up? This is a project we did in the town of Naples with the village of Naples, and I got a lot of pushback from this. There was a large flooding event that happened, and the stream broke through this area here and went into the adjacent field, and we suggested this natural channel design tow wood structure to stabilize the area, and we got a lot of pushback with it will never hold, it's not going to last. And you can see after we put in the structure, we had a huge amount of ice come through. See all of this ice that's laying around here, flooding coming up over, as we intended, utilizing the floodplain to the north of the project, and it held very well, I will say, and continues to this day. Actually now there's a lot more trees growing up in there. So holding really well. It does hold up to large water volumes, ice jams, that type of thing. So this is just from a different angle showing you, this is the area where it broke through, this is after stabilization, this is going out and utilizing that overflow floodplain area that we had established, and then this is, you know, just in the spring after that water went back down, holding still in place. And if you follow the Naples Trout Derby, they pull big trout out of there every year, so fishermen are certainly happy. And this is the adjacent floodplain area. So we gave an area for that water as it does come up and go over to access. Having access for floodwaters is very important in systems. So I'm gonna pivot here to what our shorelines are up against. As you all know, we have large storm events, high velocities of water, the ice, the wind, the waves. There's a whole bunch of adjacent land uses like homes. We've obviously had a decrease in wetlands as we become a more built environment. We talked about invasive species already, the hemlock woolly adelgid, Japanese knotweed, etc. Every time we straighten a channel and we lose those meanders in our stream, or we constrict a channel and reduce the floodplain access, that's always a problem. Streams do not like to run straight. I'll just mention that again. Streams also do not like to turn right angles, okay? And streams also do not like to be put into pipes. Every time you put water into a pipe, you increase the velocity of that water, okay? So there are a lot of things that water does not like to do that as humans we try to get it to do. And that has a lot of implications for us. Obviously, as we talked about, upstream activity, the soil type of the shorelines, and waterways are naturally constantly changing and evolving. And then also the narrowing of waterways with development, as I said, that constriction of the floodplain. So, as we talk about here often when we are in lake situations, these alluvial fan depositions, right? So we deal in our beautiful Finger Lake area here with pretty steep sloped areas, shale-based systems that come down into a flattened out lake area. And this is a naturally occurring thing, this alluvial fan, this deposition of shale that occurs. And you can see here the deposition that is occurring naturally. You can see these stream systems coming down through, and they drop out, and then the fan is created, right? So this is something that we've understood and built on and lived with throughout the years. So as I mentioned before, anytime that stream loses energy, it's going to drop out its materials. So these alluvial fans are formed over thousands and thousands of years, right? And through that time, that stream channel has migrated throughout that area. Now we are often confining our waterways to very narrow channels. And so that water is used to dropping out material and moving through that system. And so it doesn't necessarily like to be confined. And so that's what oftentimes we're dealing with, and how do we deal with that, right? And I think that's one of the questions that folks have here today. As I mentioned already, trying to direct water is difficult. Any changes to structures any changes like culverts, bridges, they can change that water velocity and also impede flow or catch debris, as we've already talked about, right? And then also just a point is this shale material is transferred along the shoreline. It's a natural process, right? And this shale then migrates along the area. How are we doing for time? I'm sorry, I don't see a clock.
7:13.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to share a quick story because, as I said, I live on Cuca Lake, or grew up on Cuca Lake. My parents still live on Cuca Lake. 3 houses down from us, there is a stream that comes out, and it deposits a large amount of shale there. Okay, and growing up, we had a nice shale beach, great for skipping stones and making all the piles of rocks we could. We had a new neighbor move in, and he had a cement seawall. And he decided that he would like to, in front of his seawall, kind of build a large seating area for his deck chair. So he took his wheelbarrow down and systematically over the past 5 years has been taking buckets of that shale and building out this patio area in front of his seawall and lining it with rocks. Beautiful structure, great area for him to sit off. Totally not permitted what he's doing, not something the DC would allow. And it also has dramatically changed the amount of shale that then populates my parents' beach. Because that shale that was coming off that point and moving down naturally now does not come down. And so my parents' beach then has been basically taken away because of that large structure that's been placed out in the water. And it changes the movement of the water and where shale is being transferred to. So this is, again, these are natural processes, and then when we build structures, it changes the dynamics. So when we're looking at shoreline stabilization, what do we look at? And it really does depend on a lot of different things. The main thing is how much energy that water has. So if you are in an area, a small pond, small lake situation where you have small waves, small fetch is the length of water, right? A short fetch versus we're in a very long fetch here, which is a long distance that wind can travel, water can travel. Gentle slope, sheltered coast, you can really deal with these green, softer techniques, yeah? But as we get more into, think, Lake Ontario or the ocean, large waves, large fetch, steep slope, open coastline, we tend to go with more hardened structures. And so these are all considerations when we're designing a project. What do we need to look at and what do we need to choose? DEC is certainly pushing that soft structure, natural shoreline, and it's something that I promote, but it's not always right for a place, right? So we need to figure out what's right for that specific location and what design works. And again, just coming back to the point of maintenance and access, always maintenance. What structure are you putting in? What maintenance is required? Is it going to function over time? So, what's so bad about seawalls? As I said, DEC is not happy about seawalls. They're not permitting new seawalls. If you have a seawall right now, you're grandfathered in for that and can do work, but you're not allowed to extend the seawall into the water, right? The rationale behind why seawalls are not wanted is that generally they're a vertical flat face structure that reflects that wave energy. So when a wave hits it, that energy is reflected back off. There's no habitat potential whatsoever in a hardened structure like this. And then it can transfer that energy to other areas that can cause erosion. As we said, DEC will permit replacement above ordinary high water mark, OHW is ordinary high water mark, and the same footprint as the existing structure, but not new encroachment. So some resources if you're interested. There's a lot of stuff online about shoreline stabilization. New York Sea Grant has a lot of publications about shoreline stuff, so you can find out more information about them. I can let you know later if you want links to any of this, or you can just Google. One of the things we talk about always is we're looking at projects, do you need a permit? And this is a call out to this amazing stormwater toolkit that you have here for Canisius Lake. And Mary has copies here on hand, and also there's the full publication online, and it's a great resource. So it's looking at what your activity is, what area of disturbance you're having, if your activity is in or adjacent to a wetland, if you are in a lake or a stream system, if it is a classified stream, if it's a Class C stream, it would be Army Corps of Engineers. If it's a CT or above, which means a trout stream, CT, then DEC has jurisdiction. So it can be complicated. And then obviously our lakes are all DEC jurisdiction. So the permitting side of things can be complicated. And the main thing is check your toolkit and ask. Ask DEC, ask Army Corps, ask Soil and Water, ask other resource providers. I'm not sure if Corporate Extension does that here, so I won't throw you under the bus, but there's a lot of resources that you have to ask and find out what permits are needed, what's required. Obviously, if your activity is in a floodplain, your local code enforcement officer usually is the one responsible for issuing a floodplain permit, because you can't create a berm or impound, raise the floodplain so you're impounding water back, right? You have to stick at the floodplain level. And our FEMA floodplain maps are currently being updated for our area. So these are all things to keep in mind. And then also, will your activity result in impervious surface? And if your local town code prevents that or restricts that in any way. So as I mentioned before, it depends on what you're doing and where you're doing it for who you need to apply for permission from. And again, this comes right from that toolkit, and so something to talk further about. As I mentioned before, ordinary high water or mean high water, if they're interchangeable, is basically the area where water normally will get up to. So not huge flood events, but your normal high water mark. And basically in stream systems, Army Corps of Engineers regulates placement of fill below ordinary high water mark. In the lake, it's anything below ordinary high water mark that DEC regulates, and then that interface between the stream and water as well, how far up DEC takes jurisdiction.
Could I ask you?
Sure.
How do the Army Corps of Engineers, is that a statewide like DEC? Is there a local branch or?
We have a regional office out of Buffalo.
Okay.
Yep, so our contact would be out of Buffalo. We are Region 8. And again, in that toolkit, there is a contact form about how to reach your local Army Corps of Engineers person.
Okay.
Yep, our local office, I should say. And both for permitting and for just general questions.
And are they kind of hand in hand with the DEC then?
Yes. Normally one takes jurisdiction over a project. So when you're looking to submit an application, oftentimes you're going to need to submit a joint application. So the application goes to both of them, but usually one takes jurisdiction.
And as long as I found you, one other question
Yeah.
about the guards, a few series back, we were talking about the guards and maintaining.
Yeah.
Is that like our storm drains, I guess Westlake Road on Canisius Lake is DOT.
Yep.
East Lake Road is the county or a town road, or so it's that, or the homeowners
So this is a great question. The one of the things is, where is that infrastructure put in? Is it within the right? Those are all questions before it's even proposed. Who's going to maintain this? That should be figured out, right? And if it's a private homeowner that installs and then is required for maintenance, they would be the ones, responsible for that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
It's still confusing, like the tributaries that all come down in the lake
Yep.
are the
Often
water.
private.
Yeah, that's private?
Often private, right? It's often private land, right? Yeah. So you have a Encore system GIS database that people can utilize to find out property ownership. Yes. And so you can then look at a stream corridor and find out who owns what, right? And then know what the right of way is, 55 feet from center line of the road usually is your right of way that your municipality is, or highway department or whomever is responsible for maintaining. Again, and if you are planning a project and figuring out a long-term access and maintenance agreement, that's something that might be done, but really that needs to be established right at the beginning. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, okay. And we can talk more. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk through things with folks. I just don't want to take up your time if you're not interested. Sorry. Mean high water mark is set at a specific elevation, right? So for Canisius Lake, it's 819.4 feet. And so that's something that you can mark on your shoreline, with an elevation survey. We talked a lot about the riparian corridors and vegetated buffers, and basically, whether you're talking about a rain garden or whether you're talking about a stream system, the plants that really want wet feet and then going drier as you go, right? So you have to choose your plants appropriately and what your plantings are going to be, whether it's shoreline gardening or whether it's a rain garden or any situation, what plants are going to thrive best in that environment. And obviously we always promote local native plants. So I wanted to talk quick about a shoreline stabilization project that we did in the town of Richmond. This is at Sandy Bottom Park. It had an eroding bank here. What we did is we put in this shoreline stabilization project utilizing natural materials. Because this is at the direct north of the lake, with a long fetch of the lake, it's getting a lot of wind and wave and ice action. So what we did was we installed boulders out front to break up that energy of the water, and then installed softer structures behind. We couldn't have just put those structures in. They would have been pounded by wave and ice and not survived, right? So that's what I mean by you have to choose what you're putting where and what you're designing. And then, when we had trees already there, we packed rock in around the root structures to protect that rock area, but obviously we didn't want to excavate around the tree roots that were there. We wanted to protect them. And you can see the red osier, these are red osier dogwood cut stakes that we just jammed in there for some protection as well, and then a lot of different plantings along this coir log. I believe this gives you kind of like a schematic of what it looks like. So the bottom one, there's a coir log, and then these are soil lifts. So it's basically like a burrito where we had coir fabric, soil, and then the fabric was rolled back on top, right? So it's filled soil lifts with this coir fabric. And then you can see here, we planted it out with native plantings. You can see here when it was establishing itself, it was growing really well. We had a nice little sign that explained the project. Fabulous, fabulous. This is the sign that's there. You can go check it out. It's lovely, it's still there. The problem was 2023. So, as you know, we had a huge amount of rain this spring. And there are a lot of issues with Honeoye Lake. One of them is the outlet and water moving out of the lake. And this area here was inundated with over 2 feet of water above the top for a month over, as well as that wave energy action. So that basically destroyed our project. So the problem is that when you are designing and building a project, it's difficult to think about a project that is something that you're not anticipating, like full inundation of 2 feet of water for a month of time. Not something that we'd seen before. It was a very unique situation, and hopefully not something we'll see again, but a lot of shorelines are really deeply impacted by this. I will say that you can see in this photo here, anytime that we had plant root structures that were well established, they really held in place, and it really helped us maintain that structure. I know you can't see it, but there are, and the water is still very high here, by the way. There are still, the coir material is still in place. You still have vegetation holding it, so it's not a complete loss. I shouldn't say that. I just feel badly, so it's not what I want it to look like. But that's what we find out. And lessons learned. one of the things I would have done is in those soil lifts, I would have fronted that soil lift with a coir log, right? And then put soil behind it, but that way when the water went in through the mesh, it didn't pull the soil back out with it when it got that total inundation and high wave action through there. So providing a little bit more softer but structure. So that's kind of the lesson learned, as I said. And then, utilizing things like walls or something to, again, dissipate that energy that would take that wave action and deal better with that full inundation. This is the picture I wanted to show you earlier. It really, plants matter so much. You can see, a small little plant, massive root structure. It really helps lock things in place, and that is what saved the areas that were saved, is that root material. So very important. Establishment is key, and hopefully we don't have large water events that inundate projects shortly thereafter. So I'll just briefly go through here because, whenever you're looking at developed areas, things like local laws are very important to protect steep slopes, whatever timber harvesting might go on, our short-term rental situation. We talked briefly about septic systems and sewer systems. I know that you have ring sewer for the most part in the lake, but when we have especially large vacation rentals on shores that are on septic for folks who usually would have a 4-bedroom house but then have 20 people packed in for a weekend, it very much overwhelms septic systems, and not just on the shoreline. I tell my teenager this all the time, but hopefully he'll listen. So it's something that you need to be aware of when you're looking at local laws and preventing septic system issues. And having a inspection program is very important, as we talked about. So, did you want to talk in here?
So this is,
Okay.
I think it's just one, it's just one slide. So I just wanted to make mention of the fact that the town of Canisius, Geneseo, and Groveland all have a specific erosion and sediment control law. Town of Livonia does not, but the model law was presented to all the municipalities, so it was really up to the boards to make the determination how they wanted to proceed. I have to say, within the town of Livonia, there are other individual strategies within the law that help to address soil erosion, but they didn't adopt the full law itself. But what you'll see is where an erosion control permit is required or a plan is required, the threshold is lower than what you would encounter with the state. And Megan's next slide will talk about where the thresholds for this at the state level are. So basically this just means that the town of Canisius, Geneseo, and Groveland have more oversight into permitting in the plan. And your point person for that would be your code office. So we do have that extra layer of protection when it comes to land development.
Great, yeah, thanks. So again, this is in your toolkit, more information, so you can find out more about this. I'll kind of go through this so we can get to questions, because I know I'm running a little bit over here. But basically, the erosion sediment control plans are required for an acre or greater, or your local law, what your local law has established. And so anytime you're moving dirt and clearing a site, grading, grubbing, it requires a permit. So, and there is a stormwater pollution prevention plan that's required by DEC. There's a whole bunch of stuff for erosion sediment control. I won't go too far into, but if you're interested, I'm happy to talk a lot about it. For stormwater construction practices, the most important thing, again, is protecting any existing vegetation, clearing the site in sections, making sure you're following a phased plan so you don't have the whole site open if you don't have to, limiting the extent of exposure and duration, and following the stormwater prevention plan. For those of you who see active construction projects going on that are over an acre and would have required this permit, and they always have a stormwater pollution prevention plan, a SWIP, that should be on site and available. So those SWIPs have with them a required construction inspection by an inspector, so a certified inspector. So I perform them sometimes for towns. I'm a certified inspector. You have, I'm sure, your code enforcement officers or others are certified inspectors as well. Again, this is what you're looking for through a construction inspection. It really is critical when you're dealing with construction to maintain and protect your infrastructure and your existing natural habitat like your streams or wetland area. So this is a whole bunch of staked bales and mesh fencing just to say people keep out of this area. I just mentioned steep drives earlier with the rural roads. Just wanted to put in 2 more options. I showed you already this conveyor belt diverter with a gravel trench. This is also a fun one, this used guardrail. And again, it's just breaking up that water path and moving it on. So always ways to be creative and think about new uses for items that allow you to lower the maintenance requirements on your road. And as we talk about, how we build things, gently stroke driveways, making sure there's a crown to shoot water off, to shift water off to the side. Any areas that you can have for infiltration, very important, right? And as we said, water's traveling down, then it hits the bottom. It's still got that velocity in it, and it's going to carry material with it. We talked briefly about the on-site wastewater treatment inspection systems, I'm just going to call them septic inspections, because I can't speak right now. Really important to maintain your septic system and have it regularly pumped and inspected, especially enhanced treatment systems normally require a yearly inspection. Just a quick side note, we do this for the Kennedago Lake watershed and throughout Ontario County. And in towns that did not have septic inspection requirements and then moved to septic inspection requirements upon property deed transfer, which is how most town codes have it, I will say anecdotally, probably a third to a half of those systems that were at first inspected were failing or had some issues with them. And so you think of septic systems are not places that people want to place money. It's a lot of money required for a system that you don't see and think about until you really don't want to and have to, but it's very important. I just was going to mention green infrastructure projects, and Mary has some examples. So again, focusing specifically on retention, infiltration, and treatment, whether that be through porous pavement or rain gardens. These are some local projects that Mary can now take over.
Hey Don, I apologize, I left Don out of that process of the soil and erosion control laws, so the code officer is a point person, but so is Don.
Oh, there you go.
Yes, he's critical with
Don,
thorough implementation of it. But also, did you want to talk really briefly about the septic application process? Or septic repair?
Sure, yeah, there is a septic repair grant out there for properties that are within 250 feet of what the septic systems are within 250 feet of a tributary to Canisius Lake. So those grants are available if you know anyone that has a failing system and needs financial assistance. Have them call our director.
Does it fit the up to $10,000 with a 50-50 match?
I believe so, yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, it's a significant assistance, so Donna is your point person there. For the local projects, we just wanted to give some credit to our folks within the watershed that are doing, making an effort to help manage their stormwater on site, which cumulatively benefits the rest of us. For local projects, I'm pointing because I just don't use a pointer very much. But, all right, for local projects up here on the left-hand side, the town of Livonia, folks might recognize the Hudak properties. These are I believe they're 3 brothers. And so they've got the natural shoreline here that extends 3, even possibly 4 properties. They came together to put in that project. At the time, it was done a number of years ago, but they divided the bill and it only cost them about $3,000 a piece. I know it would be more expensive now, but when you unite with your fellow landowners, something that's not doable for one might be doable if 2 or 3 others came together to do it. Plus the benefit is, if somebody does it on either side, it makes your project more stable. Up in the center and down, up and down is on Eli Avenue. It's in the watershed, not right on the water, but it's a landowner that came in front of, again, the town of Livonia, the ZBA, and said, well, we want to build some impervious surface. We want to expand our project. And the ZBA said, well, how are you going to manage your stormwater? And they said, well, we'll put in a bioswale and a rain garden. And so they did a trade. So wonderful way to manage your water. And then on the right-hand side, that was their schematic. That's how they designed it. And they hired somebody to help with the project. And then the rain barrel make and take is a project that we've been offering. We're going to be offering it again this spring. We have over 100 rain barrels deployed in the watershed. This is free of charge. We have full funding for it. And if you guys are interested in installing a rain barrel on your property, just let me know and we can get you onto the wait list. All right, and I'm going to do this. Is this more? The Canisius Lake Watershed Guide to Lake-Friendly Landscaping, that's on the back table. Help yourself to that. Inside that landscaping educational piece, there's information on installing a rain barrel, installing a natural shoreline, and installing a rain garden. These are all things that a landowner can do to help manage stormwater on their property. And then the local resources, basically this just gets you to the county webpage so that you can see all of the educational materials that we have available. The town of Livonia is very active in greening. Right outside the door is a rain garden and rain barrel project. So you can see the picture on the left-hand side, 2018. And then by 2020, it became very robust. And down in the corner on the right, that's 2023. It just really has become a very healthy rain garden. And then the kiosk panels are going up. We have one right outside to educate landowners about what they can do on their own properties and match what the town of Livonia has done. And then for the natural shoreline, it's right out here, guys. It's a wonderful walk, and you can see some of the things that Megan has put into her projects. And you can see it right here in Livingston County. So the top left was before, the top right is after, and you can see some of the same features that Megan was talking about with the koi log and the reinforcement of the rock. And then it does wrap around the corner so you can take a quick look at what things you might be able to do on your property. And then if you go from 2022, there's our stakes and our plantations and our koi logs, and all the way up in 2023. And if anybody's looking at, interested in a volunteer project, let me know, because we've got an invasive weed that's gotten into the natural shoreline, and I need some help to get it out. Give me a call.
So I know I went through a lot of that really quickly. It's very bright now, so but you're all awake, so went from being sleepy to okay. So I'm happy to talk further about any specific projects or thoughts or things you have, questions you have. Anyone? Yeah.
The stormwater toolkit talks about a silt fence. Are those effective against high velocity water?
Silt fence is not meant. Silt fence is meant to catch silt. It shouldn't be placed in concentrated flows or across areas of water.
New construction.
Yeah. It's just meant as erosion sediment control practice, not in a water situation. I guess there's temporary things that are used like turbidity curtains and that kind of thing, but nothing that's permanent. Yeah.
And then are those debris guards built on site?
Yes, so basically they were you saw the galvanized pipe and then they poured concrete in them. I've seen it done with I-beams as well. You just need something that you're going to embed down into the ground and make sure that you have enough stability there to take all of the concentrated velocity of trees. So, yeah.
If you know of an area like a culvert or a ditch or something, does it depend obviously where it is? If it's a state road, you have to call New York State. If it's town, it really depends on where it physically is.
Yes. Yep. So it depends on who has jurisdiction. Sometimes a state road might be maintained by the local municipality just based on an agreement for services that they have. But your first go would be contacting, if it's DOT, there's your regional point person not to throw Greg Frost under the bus, but Greg Frost is the person for this area. You know, your local Department of Public Works or highway supervisor for municipalities or the county, if you have an area of concern. Certainly, as you all know, they are dealing with so many things, so you know they're triaging a lot of things all the time. But it is important to know about block culverts, especially if it's large trees and debris that might impact the structure. And then as far as homeowners, just a plug for homeowners, anytime there's a downed tree, dead, you know, woody debris in your, if you're living on or near a stream system, keeping that cleaned out, not putting your lawn waste or other things in the stream is always very important as well. So
Those are the things that our office does regulate, so if you see that happen, give me a call.
That's great. We were just doing a stream stabilization project, and I won't say where. You might see it in the neighboring property was using it as like their dumping ground for all of their stuff, and I was like, oh, I see all your potted plants and things in there. Why not?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Something that years ago used to be, we were told, get rid of it. And yet, I notice more and more it's cropping up around the lake, and that is loosestrife.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember at Long Point back, we all thought it was beautiful blooms, beautiful purple flowers, and it's invasive.
Yes.
But there doesn't seem to be any knowledge to homeowners anymore. Get rid of it. It's invasive. It's destroying the lake.
Yes.
And yet it's there. And
Yep.
I mean, I know you all or nobody apparently has any jurisdiction, but it just seems weird that
There is a more public outreach about
years
it.
of being told loosestrife is a bad thing. All of a sudden, you never hear about it at all.
I think one of the issues is that there are so many invasive species that we're dealing with, you know, that it's triaging what's the thing that's creating the most issue at the moment. And it certainly isn't diminishing the need for loosestrife control. There is an effective biocontrol that is out there that there are releases for, not so much in our area just because we don't have the amount of it, but I know in the western part of New York they do a lot of the biocontrol release for loosestrife control. Have rearing programs and all that. Cornell would be a great resource to know more about that. I would say, again, it's not that it is not a problem. Anytime you can control it and remove it, do so, especially before it seeds. But it's one of those things that, unfortunately, with invasive species like the cat's out of the bag, what can we control? Where can we control it? It's the same way that knotweed isn't necessarily controlled in the way it should be, because it's just so much of a monumentous problem. How do we control that?
I just wonder how many people anymore know it is invasive.
Yes.
Like in the Canisius Lake Association newsletter, they used to talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
We'll
But
do
it
an
hasn't
article in
been
the
talked
fall.
about.
I was just going to say that's
We
a
can do
great,
that.
that's a great thing to raise awareness, to re-raise awareness, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just
We'll get an expert to help us write that article.
There's some beautiful blooming specimens along the roadside right now that you can,
Yes.
yeah.
but
I've been noticing it more and more, yeah. It's spreading to area, you know, obviously with mowing and transfer of equipment, it's spreading a lot more into areas that it wasn't before, and so we're seeing so much more of it. And again, without a biocontrol release in the area, we don't really have a lot of control. Yeah. So. Anyone else? Burning questions? Thoughts you want? Project show me the design?
There's a couple of things that I wanted to share. Don spent a lot of time in the watershed with Luke Spinell from the DEC Division of Water. On occasion, I get a chance to accompany them as well. But there were a couple of points, some of it validates what Megan has to say, but there were a couple of points that DEC brought up from one of their field visits, and I just wanted to share a couple of other ideas with the group. In particular, this had to do with the flooding and the ice jamming of the distance between a culvert and the wooden break wall. In this particular location, this kind of information transfers to lots of other places around the lake. One of the things that they noticed was there were pinch points, areas where we talked about the narrow places will increase the volume of water. So the concept of maybe opening up a pinch point would be consideration. Managing your debris and ice jams, blocking, because that ends up backing up water and flooding around the pinch point. And then it becomes an issue for the landowners adjacent because that water ends up in other people's basements. Intense rainfalls, there's not much to do about that except to be prepared. Some of the strategies discussed, they emphasized highly that landowners come together in a partnership for solution. So whether it's a homeowners association, formal agreements, to come together, figuring out who owns what. Landowner, real property tax is super helpful with that. Where does your property exist? And some of the property lines are changing, right?
Can I just jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say another critical thing, especially when you're dealing with shared properties, is knowing, first of all, what is a classified stream, what is a drainage. So a classified stream has rules and regulations about maintenance for it. If it's a drainage way, it might not have those same restrictions, right? So, and if it is in a floodplain, it also may have restrictions, right? So for example, if you are in an area where it is not a classified stream and it just have shale deposition, you are able to remove and take away that material, clean it out, right? But in a stream situation, it needs a permit. Side casting, removal of material and placing it on the side of the stream is never going to be allowed and permitted, okay? Because first of all, to the detriment of the stream system, that material can then be remobilized back into the stream. So it was a common practice before, and what that does is it incises the stream deeper and creates more of a trench, and then you have this high berm, and so it really cuts off the floodplain. So side casting, not allowed anymore. But just a thought for especially shale-based systems, which it sounds like some people have issues with, there are maintenance strategies that can happen depending on what area you're in. So know if it's a drainage, if it's a stream system, what your rules and regulations are, if it's a floodplain, who has jurisdiction, what permitting is required.
And then they also emphasized that after you guys come together for a partnership, that really technical and engineering advice would be appropriate, because this is something that landowners really need to have input.
And I think it's not in, I don't know if you have that stream handbook, you can do a lot of damage in a stream system by doing what you think is going to be a good thing. Okay, there's a lot of times where homeowners are, say, scooping out an area of the stream, thinking that they're removing material and gonna help that stream. This is just an example, conceptual, okay? So I'm not pointing fingers or a specific area. But if you have a stream, a long stream corridor, and you have accumulation in one spot, and you scoop that material out and create like a little basin, that water comes, hits that scoop, and drops out more material. So you just created more of a maintenance nightmare for yourself, rather than allowing that velocity to keep through and keep that bed load with the stream and move on through the system. Just a conceptual thought of, you've got to think like a stream, think what are you doing, think whole system. I know as property owners, it's very difficult when you have a very small, narrow area in which you're able to work and impact. So you need to think holistically of the stream system. What impact is this action going to have on the system? And especially with New York State drainage law, you can't impede or manipulate drainage to negatively affect your downslope landowner, right? That's against the rules. So things to keep in mind and thinking through. And so having a design professional, an engineer, or someone who knows stream systems come out and take a look and provide advice or just a feedback is really important, because you can unintentionally mess up a stream, which is what a lot of the systems that we're dealing with, whether it's ditching or straightening or whatever we've done, has created a lot of these, or exacerbated a lot of issues.
Yeah, lots of locations
Yeah,
around
and
the lake.
again, this is just another point because a lot of culverts now are undersized. As we upsize culverts, that has dramatic impacts upstream and downstream, right? And two 12-inch culverts do not equal a 24-inch culvert. So there's a lot of hydraulics, behind what water in a pipe, what happens, right? There's engineering calculations behind what water should go in what pipe and how. So it's really important to have that type of thing engineered so that you're not creating a situation unintentionally. Yeah.
And I will just mention that my background in landscape architecture and as a landscape contractor and my work now with Cornell Cooperative Extension gives me some practical knowledge for site visits to help you facilitate the conversations both with homeowners and with potentially improper design that has happened in the past, or unfortunately the problems all have came from us developing the shoreline and the impact of dwellings and hard surfaces. I was at a site on Westlake Road recently, and they took straight in the stream, they put side vertical walls, and then want to know how they prevent ice jamming and flooding. Well, take the houses out and you'll not have a problem. Or design the vertical walls to be the equal size, so there's not one property owner that has a higher wall than the other, so the water flows one direction and not the other, which is, to her point, which is really technically illegal in that construction to now impede someone else's property. But
So Ontario County has 5 finger lakes, right? So I don't want to say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot. The good, the bad, and the ugly for sure, and good solutions and really bad solutions as well. So if anybody has any questions for me at all, or wants any further information about any of the resources I provided, my cards in the back table, feel free to reach out. I'm not Livingston County, but I'm happy to offer any support I can for it, or direct you to whomever could if I have that knowledge. Okay. All right.